And I would be remiss to not call out that this cab actually evolved out of the EDI task force. So it was a group of people. It was supposed to be a short-term, collection of folks trying to kind of change some of the structures of IRL to reflect the diverse groups of people that were a part of it, and making sure that we weren't just going with the contractor that did the thing that we said that we wanted to have, but that it was really embedded in who was part of the program and what we wanted to bring out in those people. And knowing that, some folks have had deep experience with, for example, diversity, equity, and inclusion training or things like that, maybe could have even led things themselves, and being able to show that people are in different places and being able to speak to that. So out of that initial group of IRL fellows, and then alum, came this idea that actually, yes, there's the EDI task force, but there is an overall need for spelling out more of what community partners needed. And that is kind of the genesis of the CAB. So from the fellows, in a more directed feedback way through the EDI task force, came this cab.
I love that, Z. I think it even hits on a point of just saying how we evolved. It wasn't just by being in meetings thinking that we have all the answers. It was the
Mm-hmm.
ability to take advice, listen to
Yep.
fellow, figure out how we could get engaged. I even think about the community corner, the way we've
Yes.
been able to give space to community partners just to talk amongst themselves, to talk about the wins, to talk about what's working out for them, to talk about ways things to get better, not just within their own community, but even within their project. So a lot of improvement. I feel like the IRL journey, if you could explain it in one word, in my opinion, I would just say growth. And then two, I'll say intentional growth.
Yeah, I want to speak to that a little bit. I think the initial idea of IRL was a good one. I think there was a recognition that community members can bring a lot more to the table and enhance doing research. But I think it wasn't not until we got into it and some of the tensions that exist in doing this kind of work, especially community engaged research, really started to come up. And it's not just that we were doing it, but we also had to go back and repair or really reorient the whole way of doing work with community partners in community than I think maybe was initially conceptualized. And that push really came from the community partners in early cohorts. So the feedback we got, and we heard this a lot in when early meetings, like they're tired of being exploited. They're tired of this sort of colonial parachute in, take data, and go out without really engaging with the community, without really listening to the kinds of questions that they wanted answered. What kinds, and what do you do with the research findings when you generate them anyway? So I think that really was a reorienting, and I would say we're partway through that reorienting. I don't think we've necessarily nailed it at this point, but the process of doing all this and the process of taking the feedback and hearing some of the anger from folks has prompted us, I think, to try and reorient a little bit to a different way of doing work. And I think the value of engagement with community really does shine through in including or having research that is led by members of the community, having members of the community ask questions that they need answers to. And then what follows is a different kind of structure for doing research. And it also follows that there's a shift in power and control of money. And I think a lot of what I've learned is when I came up, oh, you got to go study hard and get your PhD and come in and you'll be celebrated as this great mind, this great scholar. And the reality is, unless you actually produce something, no one cares about that. And the process of that doesn't select for humility. And I think humility is a big lesson, especially for researchers in this process. And I think we're trying to craft a new way of doing research that is, we still think is more valuable than the sort of the old ways, the traditional ways of doing research. I think we're on our way, and I look forward to more progress in that space.